my mic, so I might sound a little bit different, but let's go ahead and get into this new series. I've said it numerous times before, but it's been almost a full decade since Left 4 Dead 2 kept us hanging. Many questions have been raised, but not many have been answered. Left 4 Dead 2 brought us all the way from Savannah, Georgia to New Orleans, Louisiana, with a myriad of settings to plow the infected through. But what lies beyond that checkered flag after the bridge blew up? Today we're looking to create a discussion on just what happened after Left 4 Dead 2. Due to the severity of the outbreak and numerous context clues among the piles of uninfected dead bodies that the survivors find in the parish, Nick, Coach, Rochelle, and Ellis came to realize the military was taking out people no matter if they were stricken with the green flu or not.
These ain't zombies. Somebody's been shooting people.
When the survivors radioed the helicopter pilot in the bridge finale, Papa Gator was heavily stressing and inquiring if they were infected. The survivors would argue that they were not infected considering they fought through 3 states worth of infected, and as Coach politely puts it,
"Have you encountered the infected?"
Encountered? Boy, I am covered in zombie blood and puke and eyeballs and 20 other parts I don't even recognize. We are immune as shit.
Despite this, the military personnel will stress to ask if they are in fact infected. To the military, the survivors could very well be infected but not show signs. They could very well be carriers who are immune to symptoms of the mutations of the green flu virus, but that does not mean their body cannot contain and harbor the virus and eventually spread them to people who are not immune. Much like in the motion picture 28 Weeks Later, when the son Andy is bitten by his father Don, the audience assumes Andy would succumb to the rage virus, but he actually only shows the physical symptoms of a bloody eye and nothing else, showing that Andy was infected by the rage virus but was immune to its rabies-like effects, which would make him a carrier much like his mother. A better example from the same movie, the mother who was infected with the rage virus, who didn't go into a frenzy but showed the same bloody eye. Without knowing of her carrier-like status, her coward of a non-resistant husband gave her the French tongue twist and then started the infection all over again. So basically, 28 weeks later could have been prevented by not having a fateful kiss. PSA, kissing can get all of London infected and carpet bombed. Don't do it.
Kiss me like you wanna be.
The military ask each other if they're equipped to fly out carriers of the disease. They are apparently ready to transport possible carriers in a short amount of time and give the survivors a chance to get aboard. The 4 survivors fight across the bridge and make it into the apparently safe harborage, and this is where the story has been left up in the air since 2009. This is where we come in and try to fill in the blanks with a branching arc of possibilities. Assuming the rescue vehicle wasn't hit by the debris of the exploding bridge and destroyed in the air, once the helicopter finds a safe harborage to land at, possibly a military outpost off the coast, they would probably unarm the 4 survivors as a safety concern, since they are citizens in this epidemic after all. What happens next is where the timeline divides. Number 1, out of the realm of possibilities, I want to go ahead and get the darkest scenario out of the way. If the army were to repeat their sins of the past, much like they do the countless uninfected people in the city of New Orleans, then it goes to say that Coach, Rochelle, Nick, and Ellis would be lined up against a wall. Before this were to occur, Coach, Ellis, and Rochelle would try to plead for the group's lives and try to come to a peaceful agreement with the soldiers. Nick wouldn't let himself be taken down without a fight, considering he knew what the inevitable conclusion would be. Nick would either mouth off at the personnel or try to rush them and be the first one to be picked off and die. And eventually the rest of the group would be executed to prevent a possible infection in the army's ranks. If this outpost had scientists or medical doctors, it would be much like the Millhaven outpost from the Left 4 Dead Sacrifice comics and see about finding a cure by examining this group. Considering they are possible carriers who are uninfected by the green flu, they would find it as a great opportunity to fight this constantly evolving epidemic. This would, however, lead to each survivor possibly being isolated and causing unrest and uneasiness in the group. Nick and Coach would find reason to think that the military has worse plans for their team. Ellis and Rochelle would remain optimistic, and Ellis would probably just regale the doctors and soldiers of a ton of Keith stories as they locked him up or examined him. The safety of the island comes into play here, whether the personnel there were wearing masks in case of airborne pathogens, and if infected were to not be found on the land. This could be a long-standing and rather uneventful turn of events, as they could stay there for an indefinite amount of time until rations would run thin. Now, if this were to happen, if rations were to run thin, they would have to make frequent visits to mainland just to get supplies to survive. If they were able to successfully scavenge for supplies, they would be able to keep up this research and lifestyle until either the infected died off, the survivors ran out of rations, a mutiny occurred and killed the survivors, or a possible cure or prevention would be discovered, although that possibility would be highly unlikely. Another case would be in the case that they were successful in either finding a cure or suppressant or outlived the infection, the survivors would help and rebuild building society by using each of their unique skills. Coach would serve as a leader who would be quick to create a steady food supply for him and his group. Ellis would be handy at refurbishing old machinery and vehicles. Rochelle's time as a broadcast reporter could be used in either radio broadcast to find other surviving communities or in bringing in peaceful negotiations when the group would quarrel and even get violent with other groups or themselves. Nick would serve as the tough guy who would be eager to go out on expeditions to scavenge for food and other supplies, but only if he gets a considerable stake of each hunt. Or he would just abandon them outright once the affection was over and revert to being a roaming gambler. Basically, at this point, the events of Left 4 Dead would unfold much like The Walking Dead. Communities of people would fight over supremacy and territory, while the infected either serve as a constant danger or just gradually die off, which I will get into what happens to the infected in my next video. This chain of events in itself would change the whole genre of the game into a more of a Dying Light type game, which might not be too bad with these characters and infected types. Coach and Nick's unrest could also lead to them staging a breakout to find a better place that wouldn't potentially riddle them full of bullet holes. They would rather take their chances with the mindless infected than unpredictable, uneasy, and calculating soldiers and scientists. If an escape plan were to occur, Rochelle would argue that staying and trying to find a cure would be the best option for them, while Ellis would probably go along with it either scenario. Eventually, Nick would probably instigate a breakout by clobbering a nearby alone guard and acquiring his weapon, causing Rochelle to reluctantly follow along with his plan. Nick leading the group with an automatic weapon, they would stealthily move through the base and either peacefully leave or start out a huge gunfight. What happens next in the scenario would either lead to the deaths of one or more of the survivors, or them escaping and returning to life that they had just gotten free from. That is, if they can get off the island. Also on this island is also a possibility of the Left 4 Dead 2 survivors happening upon the trio of survivors from Left 4 Dead 1. Francis, Lewis, and Zoe may have discovered an island also inhabited by a military outpost, despite having severely bad luck with these places in the past. If you've read the Sacrifice Online comics, this would rekindle the relationships and interactions made in the passing, i.e. finally building a standing romantic relationship between Ellis and Zoe and Rochelle and Francis, and also possibly set up Left 4 Dead 3 to be a true 8v8 experience if they were to make a new survivor to fill the void that Bill left. Not only that, but I don't know about you, but I never accepted those off into the sunset endings that a lot of series do. I need closure with the characters I come to love, and I would love to see what happened after Zoe, Lewis, and Francis sailed off to a faraway island. The biggest deterring factor of this reality is that Zoe, Lewis, and Francis would not cooperate with any form of military after the offense of the Millhaven compound. If the Left 4 Dead 2 survivors were to meet them again, it would have to be an uninhabited island that the personnel would fly the Left 4 Dead 2 survivors to. There could also be the shittiest way, the helicopter bearing the same fate as every other pilot in the series. Akin to No Mercy to Crash Course and Dark Carnival to Swamp Fever, it's possible the helicopter pilot could also have become infected and crash landed either into the ocean, the coast of Louisiana, or an offshore island. While narratively I would hate to see this, it would also make Nick, Coach, Ellis, and Rochelle all cuss out in disbelief at their bad luck with pilots. If they were to crash into the ocean, they would have to make a hell of a swim to shore or risk being washed away. Crashing on the coast would get them right back where they started and trying to find safe harborage, and crashing on an abandoned island, well, it could either be that the Left 4 Dead 1 survivors were there, or they would try to make it work on that island trying to get food and survive if they weren't infected there. So it just all depends on how they land if they were to crash. So basically for the survivors, it boils down to them dying right after, either to a helicopter crash or being gunned down by the military, them surviving but staying on an island to either be medical experiments or ringleaders in creating a new society, or coming full circle and re-establishing the connection they made with the 3 remaining survivors, or just going right back where they started and trying to find a new safe haven in the damned American outfront. It's hard to say where they may end up, considering a detailed map shows that a lot of the heavily armed outposts across America seem to have been overrun. The only place else for these survivors would possibly be to head outside of the states and go to Mexico, since it's right near, much like the spin-off series Fear the Walking Dead. But hey, it's all speculation and it's all opinions. I don't work for Valve, so don't bitch at me if you think I'm wrong. Ah! That's all I've got when it comes to the possible outcomes. I know some of you are going to bring up Coldstream and if it was a continuation of the Left 4 Dead 2 survivor stories, but that is the subject of a whole different video for another time. If you want to see what happened to all the infected out there in the days and weeks after everything went to hell, let me know in the comments. Did I miss anything that it could have probably been an outcome for the 4 survivors? Shoot me a comment as well. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and while you're at it, hit the bell by the sub button to get notified when my videos go live instantly. And also make sure to follow me on Discord Discord so we can chat and talk about Left 4 Dead and other games as they release. Also, big special shout outs to my Patreon and YouTube Super Chat donators, Lovable Tester, Mario, NATO6141, Ricardo Ascension, Prank Film, Zeno Salvador, Scout with the Name, Twilight Duck, Nick B, Benny Boy, Kylie Elizabeth, Emerald Wolf, Florian B. Bell, Gaius Maiden, Jesse Piazza, Seductive Spy, Ninja Brian X, Ultra Instinct Adam, Carlisha Owens, The Gaming Hoovie, That Emo Guy, Taylor07, Juan Rodriguez, Retro Gamer, Burger King Foot Lettuce, oh, I can't believe you made me say that, Josh McGugan, Michael Anthony, and Nico War.
And now for a cake moment. Maybe it'll be like the Dead Island Riptide ending and they all turn into special infected.
That's not gonna happen. If that happens, I quit Left 4 Dead for the rest of my fucking life.